Okay, well, we are going to make a start. Sorry, we're a little bit late. We have one of our brands is here. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late. Welcome everybody to Film Fashion Forum. This is a really exciting one. I'm really looking forward to the discussion for this one because it's a really fascinating question about the use of a commercial tool like a trademark as a tool of activism and as a way to effect change. And in lots of the areas around fashion at the moment, particularly around discussions around sustainability and other critical concerns in the fashion industry, trademarks start to become a way to facilitate normative shifts by creating competitive advantages by addressing improved standards. So looking at what your competitors are doing. And so I'm really fascinated to hear from brands that are using trademarks in this way, and also hearing from our wonderful experts. So I'm going to just quickly ask the experts to introduce themselves, and I will hand out with my and then we were going to go across to, is that working? We're going to go across to the brands. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Thomas Farkas.
Hi, everyone. Thomas Farkas. Pleasure to be here and pleasure to meet you all. I'm an IP lawyer since 12 years, more than 12 years, and focus on fashion law. And 2009, I sat where you are sitting now. So I'm very happy to be back and to discuss with you.
And to Tana.
Hello, everyone. Really nice to meet you all. I'm Tana Licsandru. I am a lecturer in marketing in the School of Business and Management here at Queen Mary. And I do research on critical marketing, looking at the dark side of marketing and also the negative side of brand activism. So, yeah.
Thank you, and
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Francesco Mazzarella. I'm not sure how much I'm an expert on this, but I am a senior lecturer in fashion and design for social change at London College of Fashion. I'm based at the Center for Sustainable Fashion, which is a research center that focuses on research, education, and knowledge exchange with brands. In my work, I focus on fashion activism, so possibly that's the area in which I'm more expert, and using fashion activism and making to tackle social issues and contribute to sustainability.
Thank you so much. And I'm Johanna Gibson. I'm at CCLS, where I'm a professor of intellectual property law, and my research and teaching is in fashion, but I'm also convening the Film Fashion Forum. And one of the things that's very important about the Film Fashion Forum is that it's driven by the creative work. So all the topics, all the discussions are led by creatives. They're led by artists, they're led by brands and designers, and this then fuels the interaction through the roundtable. So we'll be hearing from the brands first of all, and then we will be turning to the open discussion with our panel and with the brands in a roundtable discussion, and then we will move to audience interaction as well. So I will hand over to our first brand is Tanya, I think. Is that correct?
Is it this mic here? Can you guys hear me well? Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Joanna, and everybody else. I'm Tanya. So I'm the co-founder of the company called CICON, which is short for Circular Concierge. So regarding our branding, so there's a lot of companies around Circle. You would probably hear about a dozen of them only here in the UK. So we decided to go for something that is memorable, simple, only has two sort of vowels in it, and not too complicated, right? So CICON kind of matched the bill, and then this little logo in the middle, which is something we hope will become a symbol of circular economy and circular fashion in the future. So who are we? So we are wardrobe services marketplace. Fashion industry deems it the stage we're operating in as gate to grave. So from the point of sale of a garment, let's say your dress, your shoes, when you buy them from the shop, right, the brands are usually saying you bye-bye, and the next time they want to hear back from you, or they want to talk to you, is when they want to sell you more stuff. So we are here to actually help brands extend these relationships with you through providing better care product recommendations, cleaning advice, and connecting you to the dry cleaners which are sustainable in your area, repairs, perhaps the dress that you bought online, perhaps it is available for rent. You could rent it out, you could lend it to somebody and make money on it. And then where's the best place to actually resell your garment, right? There's so many sale marketplaces out there, your eBays, your Depop's, your Vestiaires, it's inundating. And a lot of them go up and down and pop and come back again. So we take your garment and we analyze it where it fits best on the market, and we send that garment to that marketplace. So what we basically help brands do, they are so inundated with all of these options, regulations, digital product passports, how do I calculate environmental impact? How do I monetize post-purchase behavior? How do I take back? How do I carry? It's a lot for them to handle, right? Mind you, only a couple of years ago, the only thing they needed to worry about is design, make, sell. Now there's so many more things they need to worry about that they're not equipped and not even having brain bandwidths to think about. So CICON comes in and helps them navigate all of these things gate to grave, right? So everything you see on the left is their headaches, and we take those headaches away from them basically. Oh, sorry, there's some crash there, so it should say brand there in the thing, and we kind of manage it for them, right? So there's a lot of problems that brands are facing, and some of the problems that consumers have in order to solve the circular economy, circular fashion sort of problems that we're all worried about, right? So firstly, you know, this is a law kind of departments. You probably heard about the EU Green Deal regulations that is coming up around digital product passports. So we actually issue digital product passports to every SKU of the garment, right? We're helping brands comply and help them not to risk that 10% of the turnover of fines that a lot of them might be facing, at least bigger guys who might need to face them. There's investors' pressures from Glasgow. Over 100 banks have committed to only loan money to companies that have ESG strategies. And a lot of banks every day are saying no to very, very, very profitable potential deals simply because they don't have a robust ESG strategy, right? So working with us, they will embark on that ESG journey. And finally, it's just as simple as reduced customer spending in the challenging market. You know, competition is fierce, resale platforms win consumers. So we help them capture new revenue streams that will help them navigate those challenges in the future. Now, how do we address consumers, right? You guys are consumers. You'll buy clothes, you'll buy shoes, you'll buy handbags, right? Have you ever tried to dry clean something, right? It takes a while, right? You need to take it to dry cleaner, they need to evaluate it, then you have to go back and take it back. It takes time, right? And then a lot of the times people cut off their labels. Anybody who cuts off labels, right? They're annoying, they're super annoying. And then you don't know what to do with the garment and then you ruin it, right? So repairing shoes, right? Also another hour, right? And often you can't do it at the dry cleaners, right? You need to go to another place. You need to carve out time again, right? Reselling. Have you tried reselling on all those online platforms at all? How long does it take? You need to upload on every single one of them your garments, right? And then you need to reply to those annoying offers of super low. It takes about 4 hours on average from our calculations, a lot of time. And then recycling. Where's the closest recycling bin for clothes? Like miles away. And what happens when it gets to that recycling bin? It gets sent to the global south because guess what? There's no recycling, textile recycling in the UK. There is one in Germany, but it's a bit messy and only 5% gets actually recycled, right? It's messy. So what we do, we take the data on the garment from brands, we create a digital product passport, which has all the information on the garment, including commercials, including the retail price, the potential resale price, and the landing price if it's a luxury garment. And then we automatically, through the passport, we automatically connect that garment to the right care products, cleaners, repairers, renting companies, resellers, charity, and recyclers based on the garment's materials, care instructions, price, and location. Okay, so it's localizing your servicing, on which brands are able to make 10% commission for each service that you would book through the app. And they get that invaluable gate to grave behavior and impact data, which is becoming more and more important as we move on. So as a customer, what do you get, right? You will get 4 times more effective and convenient repair and cleaning arrangements. No more trips to the dry cleaners and to repairers. They come, they collect, they do their job, and then bring it back to your door. 3 times less time consuming resell. You send us your garments that you want to resell. We scan the market for where does it match the best, right? Because their Depop would lack the size of that jacket that you have, but Vestiaire has 3 sizes of that jacket. So it probably isn't the best place to put it on. It's better to go to Depop. We will tell you that, right? And we will manage the garment for you. And twice as easy at donating and recycling. So we work with Salvation Army, who are actually coming to collect the recycling from your house. They take it, they have the country's best sorting facility in the country to understand which ones are best for recycling and put it actually through the recycling processes, which is currently under the development within the UK. So how do brands make money with CICON? Easy. We charge on their behalf 10% commission from every single booking. Care product sales, we get 10% on that. Repair booking, 10% of that. Simple affiliate marketing tool, right? But it's around the full life cycle of a garment, which comes down to pretty hefty sum of money, allowing them to make additional 10 to 40% additional sales margin, which in fashion terms right now in this day and age is huge. And this is what it comes down to. It boils down to product unit economics, right? So in linear economy, you would make, let's say, £76 margin. In circular business model economics, you would make that linear £76 margin, but you will make additional £48 post-purchase revenue through affiliate marketing commissions. And even if you deduct the digital ID price, which we're charging brands, you are still left with a very good margin over the life cycle of the garment of 3 years. And that is up 43%. It's a completely new way to look at fashion economics these days. And this is what we're trying to explain it to the wider industry. Now then, there's also European Green Deal, your Scope 3 emissions requirement, Scope 3 requirements, and the simple ESG reports that all companies are now working on. So what we do to collect that impact data and to get actually customers to come and book through the app is we're gamifying the experience. Each time you book something through the app, A, you're given credit, you're given some money back, which you accumulate over time. And B, you can see immediate environmental impact, how much you're saving the environment by looking after it better. And we have a robust methodology that we've developed with Lancaster University that has been pre-vetted by 2 certifying companies already as well. So at scale, we're gonna save the world quite a lot of CO2 emissions, water, and waste redirected from, not gonna bore you with that. Essentially, what we're doing is we're trying to become the one world or the Star Alliance of managing your brands post-purchase loyalty schemes, right? So brands should really focus on making, designing, and selling beautiful, well-made pieces, and we will take care of the rest, okay? So this is what they will get on the analytics tool. So we also work with smaller brands, can come work with us as a simple tenant. So they just plug in and play and get their QR codes and digital product passport links. We can also white label it in case somebody, a bigger brand, can afford to actually have it as their own solution in that sense. So we've piloted in Australia with 5 local brands last year. So it was quite good pilot. We had very good email open rate. 5% conversion rate. It wasn't as good on the first email, but the more brands engage with their customers on the app, the higher the conversion rate goes. But we had amazing brand references in terms of as a solution. It's a one-stop shop for everything that customers are asking for as recommendations. So guys, please follow us on Instagram. We're CICON.App, and download them in the App Store. At the moment, we're only on the App Store through the iPhone. We will be releasing web version closer to the end of the year. But if you are on iPhone, please download, and we will give you £50 credit for your care and repair. And that would be great for yours as well, by the way, in Germany. So thanks very much, guys. Would really be happy with some questions if you have any. How did I do on time? Great. Thank you.
No, that's fantastic. So if we move straight through to CQ Studio, that's correct. That's the next one. Yeah, so that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm actually really excited about that because especially the gamifying the experience, because there's such a hugely important relationship between fashion. Sorry, I'm not on the mic. Fashion and gamification. I mean, fashion is one of the most successful industries in using that sort of working, and it makes people hang about. It makes people enjoy the experience, because that's part of it, isn't it? It's making sustainability and other social justice issues in fashion also entertaining and fun.
Thanks so much. My name is Cassie Quinn, and I'm the founder of CQ Studio. So I'm going to just introduce a little bit about who I am, because as you can guess from the name, the company is based on me. The company kind of evolved out of trying to solve my own problem. I originally was trained as a fashion print and textile designer. And when you are, especially in the print and dye lab, you use a lot of toxic chemicals, there's a lot of waste produced. And also I found that at the time, whenever I was studying and I was trying to create my first collection, there wasn't a great deal of very interesting textiles that I could use to make interesting clothes. So I really set upon the journey to see what I could create for myself, specifically around embroidery was my interest. So this is the company, and this is what we're focused on, is turning waste into worth. We really think it's interesting that we look at the value systems that exist in the fashion industry and how we can give you new value to waste streams, so whether that's in our plants or in other parts of the fashion chain. So our lab, we're based between two sites here in London. We have our main studio in the Trampery in Fish Island Village, which is in East London. And then we have our prototyping space in Makeversity in Somerset House. This is so we have access to a really wide variety of different tools and equipment in order to produce some of the materials that we develop. So what we offer at the moment is quite a broad range of different solutions. So we've got a materials catalogue. So this is some of the materials we've already developed. We also work on bespoke commissions. So while we're still in the R&D phase of some of our textile developments, we work with brands and small projects to come up with innovative solutions to some of their issues that they're tackling. And then also the education side of things, which we find quite important. We want to educate our future customers and also the brands as to why these materials are needed and why the transition to more circular processes is really needed. So I'm going to take you through some of the materials and the projects that we've developed. In Fluctuation, this was the project that really kicked off the sort of transition from project-based work into the actual business. And so this was looking at flax. So flax is what makes linen. And although it's a great fibre to be grown in the UK and especially in Ireland, it's not a widely adopted crop here. So I really wanted to investigate what we could do to give more value and diversify the plant. So I started off by working with Malin Linen, who are based in Ireland, and they use a regenerative crop rotation. And what this means is that it helps heal the soil as it grows. And this means that not only is it a sustainable fibre that you're using at the end, it's actually replenishing the nutrients that are lost from the growth of the material. So looking at all the ingredients and all the materials used in their crop rotation, I then set out to create a wide range of different potential textiles or materials that could be used in fashion. So the first thing that we developed, we prototyped was flax leather, and flax is 14 times stronger than cotton. So really the use of this in sort of faux leather or vegan leather makes a lot of sense. The coating is also completely biodegradable and plastic free, and all of the pigments are pigments found around that farm. So it's a hyper localized system of production. Then also potato buttons. So these are made from the waste of the potatoes, which is obviously used as a food, and then we use the waste stream from that. They were 3D printed into molds so that they can be used over and over, and they're super rigid. So starches are really, they're already used in the food industry for your biodegradable knives and forks, and to use them in fashion for something like these accessories makes a lot of sense. Nowadays, a lot of them are plastic based or plastic coated. Flax fur. So again, trying to really widen the potential applications and the uses of the material. So wanting to show that it can be not only a linen, which is typically a summer fabric, it can also be used in, you know, more autumnal and winter products. And again, the colors are pigmented with plant dyes. And then the water that we create, the dye water that we created from this process, we then turned into sort of fertilizer sequins. So we used a process where we actually reused all that wastewater and turned it into these plastic-free sheets that could then be cut into sequins. And so the intention with this project really was looking at, you know, when we start to apply new processes into existing crops, we can actually really start to show that there's more what we can do with what exists. A lot of the times with, you know, the biodesign movement within textiles, we think of new sources of how we produce our materials. So whether that's bacteria or mushroom, they're great use cases, but we've got a plant that already exists and there's a lot more that we can do with it. And that's what we're really focused on showing, is using all of that plant, all of these crops, how much we can actually benefit from. So the next project, and this is really sort of our main focus now, we still have the, you know, those products in the background, but we're really focusing on this material. It's what we've seen most interest in, and what we see the most potential in the scale. So it's called accessories, and originally it was developed for LVMH for the IUCN conference, which is a major conference in Marseille for biodiversity. So all the leading scientists come together to discuss some of these problems with biodiversity and what we can do to solve them. So I've started to look at the problem of dye waste. When you dye t-shirts, your clothes, fabric, sometimes up to 50% of that pigment will not fix onto the fabric. And, you know, there are regulations in the EU, but further afield, you know, it's a bit chaotic and there's not really much that we can do. And you often see, you know, whole rivers and lakes completely colored with next season's color trends. So I really wanted to know, let's look at this wastewater as a resource. You wouldn't take £10 and then just throw away £1 of it. You know, how can we reuse it? How can we put it back into the system and make something with it? And so I created this process that's now currently patent pending as well. And it basically uses food waste to remove those contaminants in the water. So what happens is you put the food waste solution in, it binds to the dye particles, and then it knocks it out of the water. So in that far right-hand side image that you see, that is the water separated from that dye sludge. And this means that you've got the easier opportunity to separate the water from the sludge. And what I do is separate that water and then cure it into these sheets. So this was the initial first experiments to see, you know, what they would look like, how they perform, how they would feel. And as you can see, you know, they look, feel, touch, perform just like plastic. But it's completely bio-based material. So from that, I wanted to apply it to what my problem initially I was trying to solve, and that was within embroidery. And I wanted to create different types of sequins and embellishments, and also wanted to kind of push it and make three-dimensional sheets, which is quite difficult to make. Sheets are quite easy. It's, you know, you see bioplastic sheets often, but to actually make them three-dimensional was how I wanted to push it further. And these are the final products that we had developed. And this was on display at the IUCN conference. Obviously, the colors that you see are the colors of the water that's being cleaned. You can also adapt those colors, the tones, the shades, depending on what you add to it. And as of this year, we were selected by the British Fashion Council for the Institute of Positive Fashion and innovator for 2023. And also we've had some new developments that we're pushing forward, including making 3D printed filament, glitter, and as well as new different types of textures and feels for the material. So there's a lot more that we're doing. And this is really what the focus for us now is on. And as I mentioned, we're also patent pending on this process. So thank you so much. That's a little bit about our work.
That was brilliant. I really like the idea of, well, first of all, the integration with regenerative agriculture, but thinking about the production of your clothes actually part of the earth and part of that whole process was really wonderful. I'm looking forward to the discussion on these. These are incredible. So we have finally the story of Neem. We do have Nick. Yep. So I'm very grateful to Nick for coming in and showing us a new way in menswear.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Nick Reed. Yes, I'm the founder of Neem. We launched in October 21, and then we've been growing since then. So I have been in the menswear industry for over 20 years. I was a carbon guzzler for many years. I worried more about turning left on a plane than I did anything else. I was traveling the world for low-cost labor, and I was the buying and brand director at Charles Tyrwhitt. I joined them as a startup and then stayed with them for 16 years and then left them as buying and brand director. And then I went to Moss and I was buying and merchandising director there, and then also buying and brand director at the end. So generally my remit at those brands was to source the lowest cost labor we could without much concern for the ramifications of the product that we were sourcing. So that meant starting in Romania, Cyprus, Egypt, then moving east to China, then into Vietnam, then into India and Sri Lanka, and then latterly in the last 5 or 6 years in a deep way in Bangladesh. And what I thought was that within the design process, there wasn't much concern for the designer end of life. And what I was noticing as there was a growth, I mean, you see it on a graph, that the growth of man-made fibers, so nylon, polyester, acrylic, and then poor viscose rayon, was also seeing a deflation in costs and a growth in production as well. So the graphs was pretty simple. Man-made fibers come on the market, costs reduce, production increases, and then as design graduates were coming into both those businesses, they were very focused on style of the product. They were very good on trying to get a style right, but they weren't necessarily concerned as deeply as we've seen from Cassie how the product was made or what it was made out of or where it was sourced or who made it. So whilst there was a lot of talk within the industry about this, and there have been some improvements with SEDEX and audits of factories, a lot of it was rubber stamping in the industry. If you had to hit a target, a quarterly target, and it meant you had to fly the goods in, you would fly the goods in. You needed to reduce the costs and increase the amounts of polyester in the product, you would do that. So the pandemic hit and it brought the best and the worst times out of people. So it brought the sort of the Thursday night clapping, but it also brought some quite destructive behavior. So some unmentioned retailers, for example, cancelled stock in that sort of March, April, May period, and then went back to suppliers, predominantly in Bangladesh and India that I know of. I went back to those factories in September, October of the same year and said, as the economy started to open, people started to purchase again, they started to move to online. Can we buy that stock back at half the cost that we cancelled it on? And there were lots of cancellations and then rebuys going on within the industry. So I felt that there was a need to create a comfortable solution for men in the market. So it started very much with style. we felt that there was a requirement for elegant, comfortable, but we call it power casual or modern casual. So dressing up casual, targeting really a Gen X man. So we were targeting 35 to 6-year-old men who were no longer having to wear formal suits and ties every day, but needed to look elegant and smart. And most importantly, comfort is what matters to that man. So we set out with a style in mind. With the backdrop of the climate crisis worsening, with a simple raison d'etre to create the lowest emitting clothing that we could in a scalable way, because if it's not in a scalable way, we can't steal market share from brutish bullying retailers. So that meant clean, comfort and considered palette, and the name Neem. So Neem, as any Indians will probably know, is an antiseptic. So we see ourselves as an antiseptic of fashion, a fast fashion of overproduction, and that's what we set out. So we have 3 yarns that we use. We use recycled cotton, 60% recycled, 40% organic. That organic cotton is traceable back to farm in Turkey. The second fiber we use is a regenerative cotton that again is traceable back to farm in Bodrum in southwest Turkey. And then the third fiber we use is a merino that's traceable back to farm in southern New Zealand called ZQ Merino. And we work with one particular fiber and spinner, again, who farm regeneratively. So there's a bit of murkiness about what regenerative farming really is. But in essence, it's enrichment of soil to encourage fertility of soil, to therefore encourage biodiversity. And by encouraging biodiversity in a rich, fertile soil, it eventually sequesters carbon, albeit the data is still being properly analysed. So we use small makers who use proportionally or fully renewable energy. That was important because it was a very simple litmus test as to whether they were interested in what we were doing, which meant that we were using recycled thread, we were using recycled buttons, we were using recycled labeling, obviously. But the sign that they had installed some renewables within their factory meant that they were committed to a new, cleaner way of working. So we work predominantly with spinners in Spain and Italy, and then makers in Italy and Romania. So as I say, we use recycled yarns, which are both post and pre-consumer, but we had to take a recycled yarn and then develop it into different weave and knit constructions, because recycled, whilst it's improving at a really rapid rate, which is great, when we started developing the product in 2020, it was only really, because it's a very coarse, brittle yarn full of impurities, it was only really suitable for t-shirts or sweatshirts. And we were trying to create this elegant, slightly smarter, more comfortable look. So we then had to develop specific knits and weaves with the makers we were working with in northern Italy, which forced them to create new recycled fabrics, which they thought was great a year later, because it then allowed them to put it into their collections and then sell it widely. But we sort of pushed them to create these new fabrics at the time. We use Clothes 3D as much as we can in the design process. So that's really with an aim of to go straight from idea, where we have a fabric, so we use with those certain fiber types. So we reduce the number of fiber types we use. We know which fabrics we can use. And then we've developed a model, a shape. And then if we're doing a second colorway on that shape, we sell off the website using Clothes 3D. And we've now proven that customers, or men at least, will buy off a 3D avatar. So that means that we are taking sales before we've even made a prototype of something. So we've got the fabric, we know that we want to purchase that cloth, we've developed it, We then do the Clo 3D. We put the Clo 3D on the website, and then we run what's called an advanced order system, where we allow customers to order, obviously in advance, but we offer them a discount ordering in advance, because that gives us a read on quantities at a much earlier point that helps us then forecast sizing, because in the early days, I was sizing everything for me, and there's lots of men who are a lot larger than me. So XLs and double XLs were much more required. And without doing this, we wouldn't have had that read earlier. We want to make the lowest impact shirts. So we, with a third party, they measure the life cycle assessment of the product, because we know we go right back to yarn, farm. So they then estimate. Unfortunately, it's not it's the PDF version, is it, rather than the Canva version. But we, a company called Green Story, estimates the carbon emissions, the water usage of the product. At the time when they were a small company, we worked with them as a beta tester. Their life cycle assessment was very, very deep. So they were pulling out energy certificates, transportation methods, processes from dyeing and finishing, which then allowed us to estimate the carbon impact of the product. And then we create a league table, and I'll talk a bit more about that league table later. We have a QR code in all our products that just means that there's some traceability of the garment post-consumer purchase. And because we use recycled yarns, post-consumer use, you can send the product back to us, and then we give them a credit on a second purchase. So we built the supply chain to manage that, to sort and shred with our spinner in Spain, and then realized that we weren't going to get anything back for 3 or 4 years. So we actually take any men's clothing back. So as a result of that, we've become a waste collector. And I'm sure you all know about the problems of us exporting our problems of waste to countries such as Ghana. So we do not spend any money on paid advertising. We call it the fuck Zuck policy, mostly because of Meta's approach to climate change. So we do spend money with Microsoft. We spend money with We Are 8. We spend money with Pinterest a little bit. And we work very hard on organic social in order to get some reach that way. So we create one video and then load that video on about 8 different platforms: YouTube Shorts, Pinterest Ideas, Facebook video, and then obviously Instagram. And then I can't work out the algorithm. You'll suddenly get 15,000 on Instagram one day, and then YouTube Shorts, you'll get 20,000 the next, and then they contradict each other all the time. But the idea is to try and create peaks of content, which we're working hard on. I also think we can do a lot better. We work hard on affiliates and referrals, and that's more for the marketing people. And then we work very hard on people that care. So we do the slightly awkward thing for them, where we contact people such as Colin Firth or Ben Wishaw or Ralph Little, and we tell them about what we're doing, and ask them if they'd wear a product. And they generally say yes, because they realize if they say no, they're saying, I don't care about the climate crisis and what's going on. So generally the response rate's very good. And then obviously we get our product on those people for free. So we also do this slightly clever, or not clever, stupid thing maybe, that we do an advanced ordering. So you can order in advance. We give customers up to 20% if you order in advance. So we get, helps cash flow, helps forecasting, and also scarcity drives conversion, because we make quite small batches. And then actually, as stocks run short of a bestseller, we increase the prices in the same way as you find an aeroplane. So there's certain models that we know that we're not going to repeat on. We have a core range that we repeat, and then a range, obviously we're trans-seasonal, it's menswear, there isn't much seasonality, and most of us here would be wearing the same things in January. We increase prices by £5 or £10 as we run short of product, just to and we tell the customer about that. We take the waste back at end of life. I've spoken a bit about that already. And our aim is to do 3 things we have 3 types of customers. We have a customer that really cares, about the climate crisis. They're absolute advocates. They work in environmentalism or sustainability or academia, and they just adore us. Unfortunately, there aren't that many men out there like that yet. Then there's a second group that say they're doing a lot, but they're not. They're still ordering sirloin. And then you ask them where they're going on holiday, and they're probably going a long way away, but they think they're doing a lot, and they're mostly pushed to doing things by their nephews or nieces or sons and daughters. So we're trying to reduce their guilt within their purchase, because these people are mostly living on guilt because they've behaved so poorly, like I did for many years. So that's the main target group. And then the third customer really doesn't give a shit about the climate crisis, really doesn't care about sustainability, but they kind of like the style, so they just buy it anyway. I mean, these are just some suggestions of things we could stop using. Obviously, man-made fibers. I mean, a lot of you guys know about this. Flying a stock, metal overwasher. I love the potato buttons, absolutely great. More nearshoring. Bring in EPR, so lobbying government on that. Hopefully, Labour get in. Renewable energy, making sure that factories are using renewable energy. It's a big change. It's a very intense industry we work in because of spinning and weaving and finishing. That if that factory switches to renewable, it makes a massive impact on the carbon emissions of the product. And then retailers, they're starting to do, whether it's greenwashing or not, but Shein starting to work in Ghana. It's a £15 million investment, which in the grand scheme of Shein's profit is really a token gesture. So we do need more legislation. Unfortunately, it is government as well as consumer. So we opened up a shop last November. The shop, we do the same sort of guilt trip on landlords. We say, hey, do you really want to work with, because they've all got ESG pages, right? They're all saying on their site, whether it's JP Morgan, Landlord Estates, Great Portland Estate or Crown Estate, they're all saying they want to change. So we go in and say, well, if you really want to change, back us with a low turnover rent deal. And they normally say yes. Eventually, and then extractive capitalists come along and say, we can find someone else who'll pay more for that space. But anyway, we're in Piccadilly Arcade. We work hard there on having lots of events and parties that sort of drives footfall and a space to meet. And then it's a really good way of meeting people, of course, but customers, and understanding what's driving them within the purchasing process. Because sustainability in fashion and circularity is quite complicated. So trying to work out what it is within that sort of TikTok 5-second world is really what drives them, is quite interesting, because some are driven by climate change, some are just driven by guilt, and some are just driven by style. So we work hard on bananas. Why do we work hard on bananas? Well, our shirt emits 2.91 kg CO2 emissions. That's the equivalent to 25 bananas. So we think of products and people as in bananas, and how good or bad they are by the product they're wearing. So for example, if someone's wearing 30% recycled, 70% polyester virgin, we would say they were only 30% good and they're 70% evil still. And then we would calculate, based on the data that we can find, what that emits in terms of CO2 emissions, and then equate it to you're wearing 120 bananas. So it's just a simple way of explaining that our shirt emits 25 bananas, because you say 2.91 kg CO2 board, they've switched off. That's it. Thanks very much. Yeah, appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was brilliant. I think that I mean, so we'll ask the speakers to move to, oh, sorry, my bag's to move to the table so you can see them. And then we can perhaps, if we sort of have the brands on while you're kind of assembling, so we can round table you in a manner of speaking. Just a couple of comments. So do we have the, yeah, maybe if we go back to the holding slide. Am I doing that? What am I doing? Oh, here we are. No? So I can, keep, so I'll stay back to the holding slide. You can just, yeah, because I'm not, where my, this slide, this is, oh, sorry. Oh, why have I gone there? You can just go up. Okay, thank you. What I was going to ask was, while everyone's moving over, if that's okay, is so you mentioned that no end of life consideration products, and of course, and that's really important, because if you start to think about questions of sustainability, that being part of the production process, like the design process, I find that and in the discussion around eco design, that's the principle behind the concept of eco design. And then you have groups like the European Fashion Alliance, who are kind of pushing back at some of this discussion and saying that that's actually an encroachment upon creative process, that's to have to think about these things at the design level is curtailing design freedom. I mean, I thought that might be an interesting place to open a discussion if you are happy to respond to that. But you might need to be here for the mic. I'm so sorry.
I mean, I've got something to add to that.
Okay. Get you.
Yes, we all go here.
Oh, okay. This is the magnificent technological environment of Queen Mary.
Yeah, this is interesting because I worked on a project last year with LVMH, and we were focused on trying to show regenerative dye processes, so using algae, bacteria and food waste only. And we worked with LVMH, and they said that they have no rules for their designers because they want to encourage creativity. And we think that, well, actually, if you have limitations, you can be more creative. You have to show that you can actually react in a way more innovative way. So I actually think it's more creative to work within limitations. Especially when you're like a student, you don't have enough money, you don't have access to everything, and look at the work that's created from that. This idea that we should just do whatever we want with whatever we have available to us is kind of the opposite of creativity. It's it's just acting without any purpose. So that's
that's
personal response to that.
I think that's really fascinating. Oh.
So summarizing your point is it should be less protection for fashion designs and more limitations, or more the possibility to be inspired.
Yeah, well, I
don't know if that wasn't my point.
but more about like the boundaries around, if you tell a designer, okay, using black, for example, is highly, there's a lot more chemical involved.
Oh gosh, wrong outfit to choose.
So, you can't like say you have a certain amount of black, for example. I mean, then you have to be a bit more creative, but it means that they'll try to search for that bio black rather than just using the process.
It's a local makeup.
not else.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point, obviously. Yeah. I would agree. You need to be more creative in that sense. And maybe to that topic, because this is what I wanted to ask you, Cassie. You said, I think the filtration of the water where you take out all the colors, you said that is patent pending. And as I'm an IP lawyer, that's obviously great. Could you imagine a point where you say, for example, this patent is granted, or you have certain know-how that you would share that for free for a better good? Or would you say, well, I have this patent, then another competitor can't use it, and this is my competitive edge, which is the basic notion of IP law?
I mean, I'm quite open with, what the use is going to be for it. It was very much down a direction of, you kind of feel that pressure. I'm a very young brand, and when you've got an idea and everyone's telling you need to protect it, I'm like, okay, I feel like I need to protect it. But yeah, I think I'm still developing what the purpose is going to be of the patent if it's if it's granted, because I do think that there's this misconception that patent means that you're going to hold back and that you're not going to work and collaborate. I think what I consider it means it can't get into the wrong hands who will exploit it and who will use it to, so that no one else can use it, and that it's, there's limitations. But that's still developing as I work, and I've got conversations with partnerships with brands, and through those conversations starting to learn, okay, what are the intentions and what do I want to do with this? So that's still something very much in development, but it's always in the forefront of my mind because ultimately there will be that decision that needs to be made.
And what's interesting about Thomas's point is, of course, that's also a really good strategy. Like if you say defensively patented, so you could license it to everyone, of really accelerating the adoption of a particular standard or a particular approach, because it makes it more accessible and everybody has a chance.
One thing on that, I mean, it's interesting because that was initially why I wanted to start the process, was to license it to dye mills, for example. And what I found is that really a lot of these mills don't want to admit that they've got this problem. So they don't even want to start that conversation to then work together. So really I realized that, okay, maybe that's not the best option, because to even get into a lot of these industries, you know, they're very old, and you know, it's not like you can't just like Google and get on the phone to them. Well, not from what I found anyway. Maybe I'm going about it in the wrong way. So yeah, it's now starting to shift the more and more that I'm trying to make it sort of scalable and start having those discussions, which is a learning curve as well.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, on the point of limitations, you're absolutely correct. I mean, the creativity, Stephen Bartlett, I think, said it the best. Like it's all about lack of that really spirals that creativity, and solutions come along. And that worked very well for us. You know, CICON started on a zero budget, really, you know, no code, and then it went further and further and further with some of the solutions that are, you know, and even now, you know, there's, I don't know whether you've experienced the lack of funding situation right now is incredible, the tech crunch, and nobody's investing in anything at the moment. So, and we found that we're actually a lot more productive now on the half budget than we were even a year ago when we actually had our first investment inflow. And it absolutely true, and it works very well for us. You know, we don't have any patents, and you know, not yet. We're considering one, just the way we process the whole thing. But absolutely, I don't know, Nick, if you have something to add to that.
On fashion restriction, design restriction. Well, I mean, I think sort of over the last 30 years, designers have been allowed the opportunity through the growth of new fibers onto the market. It's been quite an exciting period to create really interesting styles at very low costs. So that's the sort of the 20-year game that's been. The 20-year game that's coming will be restriction, but there is a boardroom challenge within that, because you can't phase out toxic fibers because they allow you to drive attractive costs, and quite often they are elastic fibers that perform well and wash well, and you don't need to iron them. And but over the next 20 years, I would expect there to be a huge restriction and restraints placed on designers that will then force more creativity. But that 20-year game is shifting at a very, I don't know, a 20-year game. It could be a 10-year game. Look, if we have 3 heat waves over the next 3 years, it'll be a 5-year game. But it's only through climatic effects that it's going to force boardrooms to think differently, because man-made fibers are, you know, they're cheap and they're kind of good.
Oh, I've got. It's interesting if I can. That the point you made in your presentation about the guilt of purchasers, and then the point you made about the mills, which is almost like a similar problem, is how do you give them a soft landing such that they don't disengage completely, and you just don't have any investment in change. And in a way, it's a kind of similar issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I forget who it was, but someone was talking on LinkedIn about how they'd done a survey with like 1,000 designers, and nearly 100% of them would rather not make a sustainable decision because they were worried about the potential backlash. So it's like, this is what we need to realize is yeah, we need to be open to let people kind of make mistakes, and as long as they have the best intentions. But I think there is an issue with, you need to make the best decision, like completely 100% right, like the first time. Like you can't, decide to experiment with, maybe this dye will work better or this fabric will be better. Then you might learn that, okay, it's not as good as it seemed, but it's the honesty that, you made a mistake and you're going to change it. I think we've created this, and maybe, social media has kind of made that a lot worse, which is you're under so much scrutiny. And I can understand from designers why they want to have full control over any creativity, because you really don't have that much backfall. Like everyone's just under a microscope. So I think that that's like another thing that amplifies the dye mills and, not wanting to really discuss these things, because they will be under scrutiny then, even though it's an industry standard. It's not really like one individual's fault, which is, part of that issue is like just having the conversation that, let's let people make those small mistakes, as long as there's as much education involved in it.
Yeah. So the scrutiny is from consumers, or
I think it's
from-
everyone. It's funny because it's like we all make mistakes, but we'll all point out each other's mistakes. So I don't think it's like necessarily from one part of the industry or one, whether it's consumers or brands or retailers. I think it's just everyone. And I think once one person picks it up, then everyone kind of like snowball effects. And I just find that a big issue, because yes, there are some people who are very explicitly just not having a car and doing bad, but then there's a lot of people that are trying and they're under more scrutiny. I don't know, I think that there's just a conversation around how we sort of like deal with each other, and sort of the care and the consideration for people who are trying.
Yeah, because in sort of as part of the Green Deal and the move towards corporate sustainability due diligence, I've heard some brands say, we're not making overt statements, or we're not making changes at this point because we don't want to accidentally sort of dob ourselves in or something like that. So there can be, it's a really difficult question, because to what extent can a sort of shift in the regulatory environment actually cause further issues? Or I mean, because I agree that and there's a lot of interesting activity around calls for labeling of fast fashion, a slow label, anything that can harmonize and the information that consumers are getting. But in that environment, maybe there are potential unintended consequences. I don't know what you might think.
Thank you so much. So the term I think that is used is greenwashing at the moment in the industry, that you need to underplay and under claim really the efforts that you're doing. And to me, I mean, there's good and bad in that, right? Yes, you're being humble about it, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that Higg Index backlash was a bit crazy. It's gone too far, because right now, for example, I can't even tell my consumer that buying something from organic cotton is 1/3 of the emissions that buying something from silk, right? Because that could even be done on the benchmarks. You don't have to go so deep and so correctly on every single supplier out there. You can actually demonstrate that your purchasing decision on the Higg Index still, but that's fine. We live through the Higg Index, move on. What is another thing about the greenwashing is interesting. There was a huge outrage about Shine using resale platform. And you're right, that there's not much activity on that platform at all. There's not much resale. There's nothing to resell. If you buy something for £1, I mean, shipment will be £5, it's crazy. But what it allowed the company to do is to generate the data.
Exactly.
And in this day and age, you start with that, Yes, they did the whole boohoo thing about it. Yes, we are into resell. They did, and they actually got away with the PR. They never even been like splashed for green. Well, they have been in the community, but not legally. They haven't been greenwashing, because technically they are offering resell. But the amount of data that the company is generating right now is actually fueling their further decisions. And this is what CICON is trying to do. We're not about actually making that change straight away and changing the consumer behavior tomorrow. We're about plugging it in and about starting to see what the consumer comes back with. How many people actually book that clean? How many people actually book that repair? How many people actually book, recycling and da, 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 da. So that data then fuels the next step for you to then understand what, what you should harness, how you can actually move that needle further. And this is what the green hushing movement is actually stopping that progress and actually, and that's something I have a problem with, to be honest with you. So, but hopefully the Green Deal and the standardization on the product passports should help enormously. And I'm super, super happy that EU is going ahead with it. The only problem is the fashion is now lobbying to reverse, instead of putting money into investing into solutions that are existing to comply, they're investing money to actually fight that. And that is crazy. So.
And actually, so on that, maybe if we could follow on. Oh, sorry, did you have a? No. Did you want to follow on that? Yeah. It was actually probably going to lead into what we're thinking about, because I was going to ask about, because that is another form of information, the passport, and to how does that sort of work, that regulatory work in enhancing information and also labeling and so forth. How do we motivate the consumer, and does that help? So I don't know if that follows into what you were about to say, but go for it.
I was thinking for the question. I was going just back to Tanya's point, right? Around whether brands actually should take a stand in this kind of role, cancel culture and green hushing and everything else. And I think it's important and my students always ask me, like, should brands actually engage with that? Is it actually the right space to have a voice on these issues? And I think that apart from what you just said, generating data, I think what Shine, I call it Shine, but actually, no, I don't know. I think it's Shine. I don't know how it is, but
it is Shein.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I've learned this recently.
So I always ask my students to correct me on how I pronounce words. So yeah. Anyway, I think what they did is that they created a lot of awareness and education, because even if you brands have horticultural authority, right? They are in a position of power in the marketplace. And I think just by doing that, okay, it was a boo-boo, it wasn't really great, but they raised awareness around the issue, and they educate consumers, and they maybe made consumers aware of it and think about reselling, and maybe not on their platform, but maybe they made them aware of CICON, or maybe they made them aware of Vinted or something else. So I think that's very important. And on the other hand, also, when you think about cancel culture, brands now are competing for attention. Attention is the currency nowadays, right? So in a way, even if you are doing a boo-boo, in a way, if you think about the brand's bottom line itself, even when you're getting it wrong, in a way you're getting it right because you're getting that attention. So there are goods, and although I'm coming from a critical marketing perspective, and I shouldn't say that, but yeah, I trying to kind of having playing the devil's advocate. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question though. So
well, it does follow in a little bit, because I find it quite interesting that like you say, that the brand is a kind of authority, and as you mentioned, that having that cultural authority, and that can motivate action in particular ways. I mean, you've both been working in brand activism. How do you see that? How do we implement that effectively in fashion more widely? I mean, it's inconsistent, and how do we find that some brands might have the authority that they in responding to what other brands are doing?
To be honest, I don't work much with brands. I work very much with grassroots communities and with local government. And I define my work, and actually, even if so as a designer, I find myself as a bridge between the communities and the top-down services that local, in this case, mostly local council I work with. And I think as well, because designers sometimes are stuck in the middle, and actually all these issues are quite systemic, and we need collaboration across brands, consumers, education, and government as well. So I do work with some brands, but very much micro businesses, because I think they're much more open and agile and flexible to innovate. Some of my colleagues, they do work with large brands, but honestly, I think it's very much pretty much social corporate responsibility, often used as a marketing tool, and I don't really believe in them. I've worked with big brands, and they don't really engage. Sometimes they invest, they give us funding to deliver projects, and they're so detached We develop lots of educational resources even. Of course, they think it's a good investment to invest in education, but they're not really co-creating any resources with us. And of course, they have lots of knowledge, lots of data, and many other things. We also have our own knowledge, but we could collaborate much better. But instead, when I work with consumers, with communities, I find it much more exciting. So yeah, that's why I also felt I'm not quite an expert. I don't deal with,
No, but I'm
but
really interested
I
in
want
that.
to bring this perspective
Yeah.
as well to work across the outside of the sector, beyond fashion, and also thinking about working with grassroots communities,
Yeah.
and also all the way up to the government and how we can navigate all these complex
Yeah.
agendas. But maybe one of the questions of this discussion is also about, should brands be political? I think in a way, well, we need awareness for sure, and we need to be aware of what's happening, and we need to be involved. But as well, I think in the end, we can't do everything by ourselves, I think. And as well, I think if you're a designer, you also need to make the best use of your own skills, also your personal qualities, your values. I think everything for me, values is an important thing to discuss. Any decision I make, I always reflect on my values. Any partnerships I set up, I activate, I always reflect if these brands or businesses or funders, they are aligned with my values. If not, I just don't engage. So that's my way maybe of being radical or activist, by really sometimes even saying no to some partnerships if they are just contributing to a growth paradigm that I don't believe in. But I think as well, there are so many different ways in which we can be activists. And sometimes it can be quite political and radical, and some people just don't want to be political. And I think it's fine. You don't have to be radical and disruptive. You can also change the system, both from the outside of the system, but also from within. And I think even small and indirect approaches, even like craftivism, can be very powerful as well. And we don't have to be so disruptive. And also because sometimes, as well, something I've witnessed in my research is that some brands sometimes use activist language, but they don't really mean it.
Yes.
And it becomes co-opted, and it completely loses meaning. So what's the point of doing it? We just don't need, I mean, of course, I work in fashion activism, and I encourage my students to be change makers. But first of all, I ask them to reflect on their values. And I think as well, actually the saddest thing in this society, I think sometimes is the lack of awareness and actually values or even imagination of agency. So I actually, when I teach my students, I rather do workshops about values and skills and mindsets. And I think that's a way to find your own scope within this and make your contribution and really reflect if you want to play from within or outside the system.
I think that's such an important point, because the co-opting activist language, because then activism itself becomes just a simple kind of branding exercise. And there's a real risk in the current rapid developments and discussions around sustainability, and even just co-opting it as a branding exercise, that we will lose sight of real radical change in the business models. And that's why I'm so excited about the brands we have here tonight, because we have a real shift in fundamental business models, and each brand is also in a way co-branding with the relevant communities. And that's where, as you say, we will get change in that respect. Each brand has talked about the way they're working with specific communities in many respects, and not just communities as markets, but actually as people who are looking to find a change and to make a change. So that actually, but I'd love to open it to questions. So if there are any questions from the audience, yeah, please. I might have to grab the mic and then run backwards. It's a conspiracy.
Hi, this is a question for Nick from Neem. I just wondered how much you're sold on secondary retail markets, and how you think you compare in terms of sustainability to a company, for example, which doesn't use recycled fabrics, but which is sold very widely on the secondary retail market.
So the question is, what do I think of resale?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, through collecting men's waste, we plan to become well, it is sort of literally waste, because we're quite lucky in that collect waste in our Piccadilly arcade shop, you can imagine some of the things that have dropped off. So we will become a reseller as a result. So I believe in resale, but it's a finger in the dam for me, because eventually everything wears out. And unfortunately, the resale value of high-end fashion is high, and the circularity of that product stays in the market for a while. Whereas the Zaras and the H&Ms and the Mountain Warehouses and the Cotswolds, the circularity of that product's very short-lived. Yeah, I believe in resale. I believe in secondhand. I want us to become a secondhand retailer. We've got lots of stock that we can start doing that with. But it's a finger in the dam. Is that right? Was there anything else?
I just suppose I wondered, because I wondered, is green sold on secondary markets? And do you see it on eBay? Do you see it on any other?
Not that I'm aware of yet, but we've only been going for 18 months or so, close to 2 years. But not that I'm aware of yet. But I would be fine with that, but I would rather they sent the product back to us. So we have email flows set up that after a period of time, 6, 12, 18 months, that we send a reminder to the customer saying, hey, you bought your product, you can send it back to us for a small credit, and then we deal with the waste. I'd rather we were managing the waste because of the issue. I mean, spoke about the Salvation Army. I mean, but I mean, Oxfam as well are just sort of, the amount of only 30-40% of the product that's collected in this country can actually be resold, and that's the stuff that's still wearable and there's a market for. 60-70% is shipped outside this country because unfortunately it's too low a quality, or there just isn't a demand yet for that product. Whereas if we take the waste back, I know what's happening to it, and we won't sell it for profit. We'll sell it for charities that we work with in Ghana. Whereas if it goes to Oxfam, they'll sell it if they can, but if they can't, it's going off to Ukraine or Ghana or the two big markets at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good way to keep in touch with your customer, because of course there's always the issue with secondhand or giving away or so forth, that you actually don't know who your end customer is because it's a completely unknown entity.
That's right. The Tana product comes in really. And there's a couple of others like that, but yours are very sharp. That they engage with the product as an asset post-consumer use, and then the retailer that sold it stays in touch with that product.
Exactly.
So whether that's
I think that's incredibly interesting and important.
I'll pitch my 5 cents into that if you don't mind. So the young brands don't tend to do super well on the second-hand markets unless they've had huge PR exposure through influencers, London Fashion Weeks and that sort of jazz. But what's interesting is, and what's interesting for us, and we work closely with Lancaster University to understand impact of what we do. And those guys are total geeks. I mean, the amount of data that they come and play with is, I guess, and maybe that relates to the question I understood your question is, what's more sustainable, to buy Neem or to buy LVMH, I don't know, Louis Vuitton shirt secondhand, right, in terms of impact? So that's a very good question. And that is something that we've been quantifying as well. So if you resell that shirt, through CICON or not through CICON, we actually quantify it as savings to the environment from the perspective of somebody else would not buy new. So you're saving that amount of manufacturing cost to the environment, right? So this is, and in all honesty, probably, I don't know if you can, Nick, tell me is it like 2.91 kilograms of CO2 emission for one t-shirt, right? Like 3 bananas.
6% less than normal cotton shirt.
Right.
But it's still emitting, right?
It's still emitting, exactly. So technically you're on the plus side. You're still more than buying secondhand.
That's right.
But the question is how many times that t-shirt gets resold on the secondhand market versus how many wears does your shirt get through that one single customer that you have, who's more loyal, who gets the mission, et cetera, because if you resell constantly, and this is the problem of the luxury markets, they get resold all the time. And in order to ship between people, you get the rental market problem where the shipment and the dry cleaning constantly hijacks your CO2 emissions during that maintenance stage. Whereas if you a sole owner of that shirt over extended period of time, t-shirt, whatever you're selling, right? Then the emissions post-purchase are actually much lower because all you do is wear it, put it in the washing machine for low heat, on the low heat with a hopefully sustainable care product, and maintain it for longer. And it's hopefully durable product made with, you know, I don't know how durable recycled cotton is, but it would be good to chat actually, because it would be good to model it. So, so in terms of CO2 emissions, constant reselling through the resale platforms are higher emissions, but still lower comparing to buying new. But if you own one garment, sustainable garment over a longer period of time through one user, it's much lower than constantly reselling, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. But I think it makes sense to complicate it because if you were making a sustainable item, say, for example, with recycled silk,
yes, that's true. Yes, yeah, exactly. So that's, I mean, silk generally, I think silk is traditionally a super desired product, but from environmental perspective, it's awful. It's probably the worst thing you can get out there, requiring dry cleaning.
Well, not no, it's from one individual. You should check it. Veronica Bates.
Oh yeah.
Castle. Yeah, you should. She's very pro silk. Because it's a natural product and she thinks it's being miscalculated. But yeah, check her out. Yeah, she's very. Yeah.
She killed it.
Yeah.
No, she's great. She's right.
I mean,
Gives us a lot.
the only just final point I make on secondhand is that I think there's only a proportion of people that are prepared to buy secondhand. So, and then the second point I make is that we see ourselves as an educator. Every time we're telling a man about clothing and the damage and the pollutants of it, it's one more product that's been told about that. And I'm just astonished, because I work in the shop quite often, how many people, you know, well-educated people just have no idea about the damages of fashion. Or if they do, they're still just going straight to the poly cotton shirt or the polyvisco suit because it's what they do. So
it's interesting. Why do you think that is? I mean, is it not
we're
covered enough? Is it purposely out of
convenience, cost?
but convenience is different from lack of awareness.
I think as well, like, I mean, people outside of fashion, I don't know anyone who, like, or friends of mine that don't work in fashion that look at the labels.
Yeah.
Like, they would never look at the fiber content. It's not consideration because you kind of expect that there's honesty in what you're buying, even though, you know, you're aware that cheap brands are not like the greatest, but you know, you see H&M have their organic ranges, you just assume that they're doing good. So I think it's like not really the fault of the consumer. I think, you know, what's a busy working mom to do whenever, you know, she's out shopping. It's like an additional,
and when I do
kind of hidden as well.
I mean, I always look at the labels and I always get mistaken for a shoplifter. They're a pretty clumsy shoplifter. But for some reason, if you start looking inside a garment, you're pretty certain to be suspicious for some reason.
But also there are of course problems in terms of traceability and transparency, but or even when we have the information, is how to make it accessible to the consumers. Sometimes it's very overwhelming and daunting for consumers to access the information or make sense of this information. And as well, if they don't have any knowledge of materials, how can they navigate that information? Or also often as well, I think what in fact, I'm amazed by the speakers, and it was so refreshing. And sometimes, apart from today, often the discourse in fashion design for sustainability is very negative and overwhelming, and people just don't engage because who wants to talk about an environment that's dying out? They just rather engage with something that's more entertaining and pleasant. So how can we make the conversation more accessible and pleasant and engaging? That's why I liked Cassie's approach to regenerative fashion design rather than sustainable. That sometimes it's about sustainable is often about doing less bad, whereas regenerative is about doing more good, and we need much more of that approach. And then also, well, if I could, I know I'm mindful of the time, but I just wanted to highlight some things that I liked in all of that. And I loved from CICON the approach to service design. And of course, there is so much stuff out there. And I think what you're doing, it's looking at the system and providing customers with a service rather than just making more stuff. And but I think you are really tackling all these problems and you are making the life of the consumer much more convenient and accessible. You are totally right on what you're doing. Maybe a question for you would be, well, you showed that you piloted it in Australia. Now I guess you are expanding in other contexts, but I guess in different countries and cultures, there are different, well, in different countries, there are different social cultural behaviors or norms. How do you think you will adapt? To what extent can you adapt your services to very different localities? I mean, my PhD was all about service design. In fact, I'm fascinated by your work, but it was about situated services, I call them. And the designers need to have a much more embedded and situated approach to the community, because often these blueprints or are often technical solutions, but sometimes they overlook the social dynamics within a community. And I wonder, well, yours is very human-centered, but I wonder, how will you face potential adaptations you need to make in different communities? First of all, also, you may need to know the different, you need to get all the information from so many different places. And in some places, maybe more rural or with less internet or with less data will be difficult. But also there could be some cultural barriers towards even resale, because some less developed countries, they actually now are becoming developed, and actually for status, they want to buy things. How would you navigate that?
Thank you so much, Francesco. Superb question. So, I mean, between Australia and UK, it's pretty similar cultures, to be honest with you. But we're looking to Germany right now, for example, and out of all European countries, that is the most prepared market for what we do, right? There's a culture of buying better, maintaining it. You know, reselling is perhaps just starting. There's still this ownership and you know, keeping it for longer that is still there, which we will be playing into. But we really are in the business of what makes sense. What makes sense for you, right? Because not everybody dry cleans, right? Not everybody looks into what care products they're using, right? So we are currently adapting to existing behaviors, for example, because this is, as an entrepreneur, you have to go for the lowest hanging fruit, right? And then when you big enough, then you start influencing the behaviors through data, through influencers, or actually paying, you know. By the way, if somebody wants to run a fundraising, crowdfunding campaign through the grassroots leadership and get enough money to pay Kardashians to make repair sexy, instead of buying new, I will pitch in all of my savings, because they have power to change behavior overnight. The moment Kardashian on TV repairs her jeans and resells or buys something secondhand, I have hope in this planet, right? Because overnight they will change the entire industry and will make repairs profitable for brands. You know, we'll really make that. So from that perspective, from cultural shift, I would say that right now as a startup, we need to adapt to what's available. So we work through partnerships with our current clients, and they have their own cultures, right? Clothes Doctor, who are a care product manufacturer, they have their own culture, and Shoe Lab, who are repairing shoes, you know, have their own. So we have our own branding, we have our own voice, we have our own customer profile, but the language and what kind of collaborations we put out there to the world depends currently on each specific partner and the campaign we use. I don't know if that answers your question. But
also, actually, this made me think about another issue about the experience when you go. And actually, when I worked at the Royal College of Art, there was Lizzie Harrison who did a study on, well, she was based in Leeds, but she was doing a study about the experience that you have when you go shopping. And now, especially, all these shops are so cool, and there is so much research on not only virtual reality, augmented reality, and all this the shops are very beautifully designed, and then you go to a dry cleaner or to a tailor, and it's horrible. It looks like 100 years ago. To be honest, I'm very outdated and old-fashioned, so I go to the dry cleaner who is just in my building, so it's fine. But it's just it smells bad. It's just horrible. It's just so old. So we actually also need new interior design of experiences for these places. I think that will make the experience much more
fun.
Yes,
I think that actually follows in, Tanya, on your point about the Kardashians. That always boggles my mind, the Kardashians. But anyway, your point about the Kardashians, and also something you said, Francesco, earlier about we need to make it fun, we need to make it entertaining, and the game elements. But it kind of ties in with what you were saying about communities and kind of branding with entertainment communities, because you're branding with the Kardashians are kind of, but also, I mean, if we look at Love Island and eBay becoming fashion sponsor, is that actually the sponsor now? Is that shifting? Is that making recycling secondhand fun, or is that branding with the right communities?
One thing I've noticed with that.
Sorry.
One thing I've noticed with eBay now sponsoring Love Island is that there's a lot of brands that are putting on their brand new clothes on eBay, so they're not secondhand. It's
Really?
because so they make it seem as if it's you're buying secondhand and it's not. So it's like with a lot of these, it's there's like a term, moral licensing, and sometimes the easier we make recycling, it reduces the guilt that's associated with consuming less. So then you think I can buy on eBay without actually looking at what the crux of the problem is, and it's the overconsumption. So it's a trick, because they put it up as if it's secondhand. The images look as if they've been photographed in someone's bedroom, but they're not. They're straight from the store.
Oh, they're like puppy mills.
Yeah.
I'm much more optimistic than that. I think we're on the crest. I think we're on the crest, and the fact that I think Kardashian, didn't she do something with a conscious collection, Boohoo or something? Yeah, Courtney. Yeah. So the fact that they're even involved, the fact that eBay, the fact that Vinted have a bigger market cap than ASOS, this is happening, but it's not happening always in a genuine way. But that's just this change of a revolution, right? It's just
You want to go first?
I just wanted to say about like the Kardashians, like reselling or like doing like repairs or anything like that. Like they have like a bunch of businesses, and Kardashian Closet is one of them. And so like essentially they resell clothes that they've never worn or that they've worn. And like on YouTube, a lot of influencers do hauls about Kardashian closets. So they have that, but they never advertise that as one of their businesses, like Skin
That's
Girl.
interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to say, are you a rep for them? But no, I've
they
seen
don't
that it's
like that's the one that they don't like put out there, but like everything else is super like promo.
And that's
You can't get
interesting.
away with
Why?
it.
I mean, do you have any inkling of the
No
motivation
idea.
for those businesses?
I saw a deep dive in this recently. So I'm not trying to criticize the second-hand market. A video popped up in my feed literally this week, and it's actually because most of their clothes is unworn. It's actually stuff they've been given free. And sell it at a premium, and they sell it at a premium than what the RRP is. So I think that's why they're not advertising it, because it's a little bit shady.
Right, it's shady.
It's not a volume business. It's
No.
just like shift what they've been given.
Sorry, thank you, no problem. So I also think that they do that because they don't want to lose their sponsorships. If a brand knows that I'm just reselling it and the brand cannot sell it to another consumer, they're losing out a consumer.
So what's
So
it
why
called?
would Kardashians or anybody want to do that?
And they're selling stuff that people have given them.
Yeah, and
Wow.
like, there's also some stuff that's like been worn, like one girl on there on YouTube, she was like, it's worn by this time of this, it's like they put the information on there if it was worn.
But if it's not, I think you have a really good point, because you're going to really upset sponsors and people. That's quick to the trademark lawyer.
Easy. Yeah. From that aspect, I wouldn't advertise that either. Probably wouldn't even consider
Why does
giving
he
that
give it
away
away?
or reselling it.
Yeah.
And that also one or two questions. I have so many questions actually, but to you maybe, and as a comment, for example, if your brand Neem, let's say it's infringed, trademark is infringed, etc., but you could have as a claim is all the goods that infringe your trademark need to be destroyed. Maybe also an aspect that is important. Would you really want the products to be destroyed, or rather say, let's seize them and donate them somewhere else? Maybe not in your primary market, but somewhere else. This notion, and then a question to you as well. Where would you draw the line if you say fast fashion is, let's assume fast fashion is bad for the environment and quality, yeah. Try to be ironic. And quality is better than quantity. Where from a business perspective do you draw the line for the quality for your products? Because if the quality is perfect, I may not purchase again in the next 5 years, and it's really durable, etc. So where could you say where you draw the line of you need new purchases from your customers versus clothes that basically last forever?
So we try and create clothes that don't need washing very much. First of all, so merino t-shirts, and we use a type of knit in recycled yarn that is quite a porous open knit that doesn't need washing that often unless you spill over in it. So where's the cut? I would say that there needs, people will always buy new things for a while. Degrowth might happen, but it ain't happening. It ain't happening now. There's too many people employed. There's too much. Sorry, Jason Heichels, it ain't happening quite yet. But it might happen in 5 or 10 years. So therefore, people will buy new things for holidays, for work, for parties, for weddings. So I would rather they buy them from us than. So yeah, I think people will continue to buy new things. I don't know. That's the best of answers, but I just think. No, not at this point. No.
Do you offer services post purchase?
We offer repair. We work with Clothes Doctor, so we refer customers to Clothes Doctor, and then we have a relationship with them, and then we pay for that repair. We give them a credit on another purchase. So our model is to try and just steal market share from the Charles Tyrwhitt's of the world. You're wearing Charles Tyrwhitt now, aren't you? No. You're not. You are. But it's a non-iron.
Oh, the shirt?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have to check.
Yeah. No, so yeah, so we offer clothes repair, and then we will offer second-hand when we've built up enough stock from the waste that we've collected from men sending us their old products.
And to the IP question?
Well, I haven't thought about it. So yeah, but yeah, would either resell or donate to Ghana and make sure we have people on the ground.
Big shipment in the UK with your trademark.
Yeah,
it's unauthorized by you. You could say, let's destroy these goods. Maybe you don't want them on the market here. You could instead donate them somewhere else.
Probably, yeah. So we have a contact on the ground, or a couple of people on the ground in Ghana. So we probably try and do something there. But we would have to make sure that it was managed correctly there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would resell not for profit, I imagine. Yeah.
I'm just checking. I've got one question. Are there any others, or we've maybe okay? So we'll have these last 3 questions. Is that right? I didn't miss anyone. 1, 2, 3. Correct. Okay.
So this is a question for everyone, maybe like a conscious consumer who wants to save the environment. And I believe everybody wants to, nobody wants to negatively impact the environment on purpose, but then we lack awareness about a lot of things. Like for me, maybe it's my indifference, but I didn't know about GQ Studio or Neem Plus or CICON for recycling. And like you said, that it's a difficult task to find a dry cleaner or go through that effort. You don't have the time. But cost is a very big factor, just like for companies, for a consumer as well. So being a student, you can't spend so much of money trying to find organic clothing, which is 3 times more expensive than Zara or H&M for us. And then do you see that in future, there are going to be brands who are going to bring affordable clothing, which is going to be durable, as well as something that's sustainable? And if not, then how do we balance this out? Like, how do we do it? Like, I want to buy organic clothing and I want to have sustainable, like I have all of these things in mind, but then as a consumer, what choices am I left with? Like, so how do we balance it out?
Can I say, are we also allowed or is only for the brand? I mean, I hear this question a lot of times, and yeah, I know that as a consumer, you may feel disempowered or just lost, but I think there are so many different approaches to sustainable fashion, and people think that sustainable fashion is expensive. Yes, it is a bit more expensive, but first of all, it's an investment. You buy something that will last. If you spend 100, let's just make some numbers up. So if you spend £100 and something lasts 5 years, it can be cheaper than now I'm lost with the maths, but then buying 10 things that cost £5. So why do you need to buy all these things that cost so little? And you rather just invest more money in something that will last for long, and you buy less and that's better made and will last longer. I know that, of course, of course, we need to acknowledge the privilege and the lack of privilege of some people. If you don't have £100 today, then of course you can't make the investment in the longer term. That's totally acceptable. But as well, besides that, I think it just requires a mindset shift. But I think as well, you can make clothes yourself. There are so many tutorials. There are many workshops. Come and join my projects. We deliver lots of workshops in East London. You can come, you can learn how to make clothes. There are lots of community events where you can make your own clothes, or you can as well buy secondhand, or use the services of, or actually take better care of your clothes. Don't damage them. Clean them properly, or clean them less. So I think as well, there are so many other ways than just buying. And of course, purchasing sustainable fashion can be more expensive, but possibly you don't need to buy. You can access services. You can take better care. You can make yourself. You can get them passed down by other people. You can rent them. So you see, there is a whole spectrum of possibilities. And I hope I'm saying this just to show that you have possibilities and you don't feel daunted, because I admit, I understand your point, but hopefully we can stop a little bit, and before just thinking, oh, where do I buy the next thing, why don't we reflect and say and look and explore different avenues towards sustainable fashion.
I really like that, because it goes to the whole sort of, like, it's about that community, and then shopping or working sustainably becomes something more than just going shopping. And so having that community of sewers and having, it's entertaining as well. So it really goes to that whole social heart of fashion. And I think that's quite, oh, sorry. Can I?
Yeah. Just pick up on a couple of things that have been mentioned in terms of resale being a finger in the dam, and in terms of what brands can do in terms of brand activism and things. Can brands and brand activism and so on do enough to solve what's such a big and pressing problem? And do we actually need more systemic change, legal and regulatory change? I'm actually quite interested in whether we need an amendment to the Companies Act, which might be something you can comment on, to make company directors pay greater deference to environmental considerations and so on. And so maybe a slightly more pessimistic view than you were expressing earlier.
Maybe I'll get the last question and then I can take it all down. So do you mind? Thank you. And then we'll take all the questions together.
Yeah, my question was basically for Francesco, because it was basically about activism and fashion. So I just wanted to ask, you mentioned how these large brands incorporate activist jargon and then they don't use it properly, but smaller brands do it better. I was just intrigued, like, how essentially do you feel they do it better, or like what exactly is it that they do that you think is much better than how bigger brands incorporate it?
And that actually also ties in quite well with your question. So I will run down. I feel like a talk show host.
Yeah. Can I also briefly answer your question, the other question first? I mean, I will make it simple. I think so. These issues are all systemic, and no one brand alone can solve these issues. So we need collaboration, we need partnerships, we need networks, and we need lobbying and advocacy. But I think as well, and change needs to happen from everywhere, and we need pressure from everywhere. So brands need to take action, consumers need to take action. As educators, we have a responsibility to train the next generation in developing different skill sets and mindsets. Government, of course, need to put legislations, and retailers need to take everything needs to change. And as well, the worst thing would be to feel disempowered and not doing anything, because we have no time to wait. But every little action can make is very worthwhile. And then the question is, well, I would recommend you to look up the project called Fostering Sustainable Practices that was led by Professor Sandy Black, who is a colleague of mine. And she was working with lots of micro and small brands, mostly London, but it was around the UK. And there are designers like Bethany Williams, but also, well, so many. They are, well, look at all of this. I think, would you consider your small brands? I would imagine, no? How? Yes, so this is an example of brands who are really committed, really on the ground, really knowing what they are doing, and they are very much committed to it. I think that, very briefly, I don't, the large brands, sometimes they're so stuck in their system that it costs too much to change their system. And that's why they just can't change. It's expensive to change, but also if you are an emerging designer and you are just launching your brand, you embed sustainability from the beginning, so you don't have to change. Those brands who have been set up on a capitalistic model and growth paradigm, they will have to change everything, and it's just too much. So that's why they don't do it. But also they are so disconnected from the raw materials, from all the suppliers who are often very global, whereas those brands, they work very much locally. They know their consumers better because they have much more direct access to them. So I think that's why they're doing better. But maybe look up also the brands from Fostering Sustainable Practices, like also Birdsong, The Reclaimery, Petit Pli, Fiber Lab. There are all of these. They are all based in London, and I'm sure if you send them an email, they will reply and work with you. Whereas if they are a large brand, sometimes they have to go through lawyers and so many different departments. Even within themselves, they don't know what they're doing. They have so many different departments and they work in silos. They can't. Maybe there is a textile designer that produces an innovation materials, and then they don't talk to maybe the product developer, or maybe then the marketing team. It's just so big.
Okay, thank you. I think Francesco already touched upon some of the points that I wanted to raise. I think education is very important. To your point, I think to the other person's point, I think we need to invest more in education. I think brands like, I think the brands here are not only activist brands, but I think you're allies to activists, or to what could become activist brands. And I think it would be great for you to reach out to educators, not only to university, because that's a bit too late probably, but also like primary school. And I think we need to educate children, and also then we have to educate also students at university as future graduates about all the opportunities, and also what you mentioned earlier, you know, like how you can make your own clothes and all the other things, you know, or how, you know, buying sustainable, it's an investment. When you can't make means end, you know, you can't really think of sustainable.
You might know, Francesco, there's a person who takes making clothes into schools, and she runs programs with school children who make their clothes. And
well, we also have done some of it, but
I know it. It's in my notes. But I've completely.
My son, he's 6, he wants to learn how to sew. He's like, Mama, teach me how to sew. Honestly,
Fantastic.
every morning, I don't know how to sew. So
Yeah.
can I point it to you?
well, my students.
Your students.
Yeah. Well, with Project Rigo, I work with Cassie on Project Rigo, which is about youth violence. We work with young East Londoners to transform metal from knives into a bespoke fashion collection together with local brands. But then as well, this year, we have trained the young East Londoners to deliver workshops in local schools. And as well, there were kids from a special needs school with mental and social and emotional and mental health issues. They all learned how to sew, and they all engaged with mentoring, and that will be transformative. they would make better decisions. I think.
Can I just add to that about the education? Have I cut you off?
Yes, no, it's fine.
Are you sure? No, you, oh my God.
I think it's also important for it, just.
Maybe, yeah. Poor Tana keeps getting.
Just in
the
relation to sewing,
microphone.
just in relation to that and talking about contextualizing, I think what should because I'm originally from Romania, a country that came I followed into your presentation, and we used to learn how to sew and how to do all this kind of manual labor in school, but we associate it with the reminiscence of communism. So I don't think that it depends also where you're and how it is introduced and how, you know, so I think it's important to contextualize everything. Activism has to be contextualized. Sustainability and of course it has to be contextualized. So I think that's just in response to what you just said.
That's such an important point. And I think you also mentioned, Francesco, looking at the cultural sensitivities before understanding how you can. So not that's very good point.
And it could be even just language. Maybe you work with someone locally who can even translate and use the right word. Maybe that's maybe even it's just a matter of language, how it translated in a term that's appropriate for that culture.
You have to kind of transform the perspective on the work itself.
And work with anthropologists, for instance.
Yes,
who can
absolutely.
Understand people much better
Yes,
than we.
I just wanted to add to the education factor because it's a part of our business model. And it kind of goes back to the fact that when I was growing up, I didn't have access to any workshops, masterclasses, sewing, like it just wasn't available. And so that's part of what we do is we run masterclasses in youth centers. I've done it in schools, universities, different level. And one thing I learned really importantly last year, I was working with a youth center and predominantly it was young boys, but they weren't in the sewing room. They weren't in those classes. And so I completely shifted the project that was all focused on football kits. And it was the first time those boys were in the sewing room, actually sewing, taking their shirts home, wanting to finish them. And it was because you connected it with something they're interested in, and they never thought about how football could be fashion. And they didn't see that connection in sewing and making their own things. And I think that's the important thing is how we connect it to the interests of young people and to connect it to their world. If we start just talking about buying things to last, I don't think kids are going to understand that. But if you connect it to their hobbies and interests, they then start to relate to, oh, your shoes are made in factories in different countries. You know, it's how you actually use that.
It's about going back to their values, asking them what matters to you the most, and then you can build a whole project around
On the matter of cultures, I mean, the repair in general is not a sexy thing. It's associated with poverty and things like this. And to your point about, you know, Soviet Union, you know, I grew up in Ukraine. I'm Ukrainian. And my mother, she hated when I was trying to patch something up. She's like, oh my God, can't you afford to buy new? I'm like, yes, I can. For me, it's important to patch it up because it's more sustainable. And there's a lot of, in the UK, you know, Charles Dickens characters, they're all patched up. You know what I mean? Like all of that, you get brought up in that.
Where they have the patches on them.
Exactly, and cartoons and everything else. So, and the latest pact that they've been signed about changing this narrative, which was just a couple of days ago, right? It should actually start changing that. And I just can't wait brands and activists actually starting to, as I said, you know, making repair sexy again, to take that narrative away from Charles Dickens novels or communism on repair, right? It needs to have a new face, just like buying secondhand. When eBay actually started sponsoring Love Island, that was finally the new conversation. It actually started becoming sexier to buy something, even though there's a lot of new stuff to the point on the eBay, but there's still, like, for example, I bought a couple of 3 t-shirts from Primark t-shirts on eBay, secondhand Primark t-shirts. And I think you asked the question about how to extend. And what I'm doing with those Primark t-shirts, right? I'm washing them with clothes doctor detergents for cotton because they're cotton. And they formally extends the cotton use, right? When I got a little hole in there, I made a little flower on it, right? So it's upcycling there. And actually the recent collections are a lot more durable, which is quite interesting, I thought. You know, and then again, you can recycle it afterwards. Now that I have this tool of mine, you know, I can finally recycle it. So, and then there's the thing, you know, even if you use fast fashion brands, you can make that lifestyle more sustainable. I'm a geek. I know everything about my CO2 emissions on every single thing I have in my closet, buying that, you know, 3 Primark t-shirts. But for us, it's a big experiment, right? And once we once we make that narrative around converting that CO2 into relatable to a consumer story, you using water drank and the miles the cars driven, and that kind of mentality, when you start translating that, what's actually relatable to the consumer around that decision that they're making right now, be that sewing your own piece of clothing or repairing, putting a patch on, or just making a flower on that hole, or plus making it sexy. So it's about making it sexy, making it clear about what you're contributing. A lot of it is a carrot or stick as well. To your point, sorry, I'm just gonna correct my neck here, but
Yeah.
to your point about the carrot and stick ultimately is what is needed, right? And the stick is, how can brands monetize the circularity and this sustainability thing, right? So that's question number one. And the stick is about legislation. Tax fast fashion and the problem's gone. But can you find any single brand or company out there who will actually lobby to tax fast fashion companies? Nobody's interested in that. And there's no voter in the world that will support that, because it's going to bring the prices up of their favorite Primark. So
we can tax them. We can lobby them. Without question, there has to be legislation. So in answer to the small question, to make a lower emitting choice, to make a more ecological choice, it's most often more expensive. So that's why the small brands can do it. But without legislation,
how much money have you got to lobby for that?
Well, it's about MPs like Mary Creary who care.
Okay.
She's not running at the moment, but she might run the next election. There are MPs that do care and will lobby, so you need to know who those MPs are. And the plastic tax that was introduced is the best example, as well as ULEZ here in electric cars and people fighting it at the moment. But the plastic tax saw boardrooms across the country change their packaging design. And without that tax, boardrooms don't change because they need to make profits. So
that's why I mentioned change the companies to make differently about the directors' duties, because I think a lot of smaller companies, obviously there's smaller companies like yours doing great things, but there are a lot of small companies, not just in clothing, but elsewhere, that don't really think that much day to day about their directors' duties, because no one's ever holding them to account. But much bigger companies are held to account in different ways. But I'm not convinced that for a lot there's enough of an incentive to change. Having said that, I'm excited and fairly optimistic about what some companies do. It seems to me that some are getting a lot more interested in the B Corp and things like that. And parts of brands within Uni, but I think companies like that well, smaller companies that were B Corps to start with, that have been quite a bit of the main B Corps, but also some that are making that change. I think that's an important shift, and I think it should be undervalued or underestimated. But clearly, it's not a majority. It's not enough.
Yeah.
We have also. I don't know if we have final comments, but it is 8:05, so it might be worth heading into the food and drinks. I just wanted to thank the panel and the brands for what I think was an absolutely amazing discussion. I have learned so much. I really enjoyed it, and also thank you for the questions. And this will be this will be the last forum until the new academic year. Don't worry, it's not the last forum. But it's been a tremendous series at the moment in fashion and sustainability, and so I'm really happy that we've rounded out with this discussion. And out the back we have high-end vegan and vegetarian catering for you. So thank you so much. Please join me in thanking everybody.